There is a moment, quiet, piercing, almost irreversible, when a person finally stops hoping the world will understand them. It is not dramatic. There is no audience. There is no applause. There is only silence, the kind that settles in your bones when you realize no one is coming to fix it for you. No one is staying up at night, replaying your pain like it is the main plot. And in that silence, something ancient wakes up. A strength that does not beg, a strength that does not explain itself just to feel real, a strength that does not need to be watched to exist. That is the moment you stop performing and start becoming. Because the world may be indifferent, but you do not have to be powerless. The Stoics understood this long before our feeds existed. They believed power begins when expectations die, and in that death, your real life begins. If you are ready to stop chasing validation and start building inner discipline, consider subscribing to Stoic Ocean. It can be a quiet vow to yourself, and if one line hits you today, leave a comment with the word that stayed in your chest. Most people carry a soft fantasy that their suffering is visible. They believe that if they hurt enough, someone will step in. They believe that if they phrase it perfectly, someone will finally understand. It is a tender hope, often unspoken, baked into how we are raised. If I am in pain, the world will care. But then, life happens. Pain gets ignored. Tears go unnoticed. The phone stays silent. And that is when something shifts. You begin to see the illusion for what it really is. It is not a verdict on your worth. It is a mirror of how consumed people are by their own chaos. Everyone is fighting something you will never fully see, just like they will never fully see yours. And if you build your identity on being seen, you will spend years feeling invisible. That quiet ache of being overlooked, it is not always cruelty. Often, it is reality. And if you look closely, it might be trying to teach you something important. When we are young, we believe pain deserves recognition. We think suffering should earn comfort. But life does not hand out medals for endurance. It does not send angels every time you fall to your knees. It keeps moving. People keep moving. Friends forget. Strangers scroll, not always out of malice, but because they are drowning too. That can sound harsh, but harsh does not mean untrue. And here is the strange twist. That realization, painful as it is the first step toward becoming free. Because once you stop expecting the world to respond to your pain, you stop waiting. You stop freezing your life in hopes that someone will notice you are stuck. You begin to move for reasons that have nothing to do with applause. Part 1. The pain you once seen. Carl Jung once said, "The world will ask you who you are, and if you do not know, the world will tell you." But here is what experience adds. Most people do not ask because they care. They ask so they can fit you into a box that makes sense to them. They do not see you. They see their idea of you. And when you stop performing for that gaze, you finally start living for something real. There is a sorrow that comes with realizing you are not the main character in anyone else's story, but your own. That is not rejection. That is gravity. No one owes you understanding. No one is required to hold your hand through the fog. And while that can make the world feel colder, it can also make your inner world burn brighter. Because now you are the one lighting the fire. No more waiting for someone to read between the lines of your silence. No more hoping your quiet breakdown will be noticed and gently repaired by someone who just happens to get it. You get it now, and that changes everything. The disappointment that used to sting becomes something else. It becomes clarity. And clarity is the first real freedom. Part 2. No one owes you a witness. This is where the Stoics found their strength, not in being untouched by pain, but in refusing to outsource their healing. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself again and again not to waste what remains of life speculating about neighbors, chasing their approval, measuring his worth by their attention. In other words, stop hoping someone else will see your wounds and name your value for you. The more you focus on being seen, the less you see yourself. And ironically, the more invisible you become. You become noise in someone else's feed, rather than signal in your own life. But when you finally let go of the hope that others will witness your suffering and give it weight, you begin to build something indestructible. Not because you are harder, but because you are clearer. You start noticing how much of your identity was shaped around being seen, around the belief that someone, somewhere, should care. And when they did not, you took it personally. But here is a truth no one likes to admit. People not caring does not prove you are unworthy. It proves they are human, flawed, overwhelmed, distracted, just like you. The game was never about being seen. It was about waking up to the fact that you were always watching. You have been the only witness to the full weight of your thoughts this whole time. That is not a curse. That is a gift. Because it means you are the one with power to change your narrative. Not them. You. There is power in being unseen. There is clarity in walking without needing an audience. Epictetus said, "Do not explain your philosophy, embody it." And that is what happens when you stop hoping to be seen. You start becoming not for attention, not for recognition, but because something inside you refuses to stay small. The pain that once felt unbearable becomes your blueprint. The silence that once haunted you becomes your teacher. The solitude that once scared you becomes your home. And when that shift happens, you no longer need to broadcast your wounds. You carry them differently, not as a burden, but as proof that you kept going. So maybe being overlooked was not the tragedy you thought. Maybe it was the beginning. The slow, quiet death of illusion and the birth of something real, something solid, something that no longer seeks validation because it is too busy building something permanent. You do not need to be seen to become something great. You need to see yourself clearly, honestly, without decoration. That is where everything changes. That is where your real life begins. Part 3. Self-reliance is boring until it saves you. When no one listens, something unexpected happens. You start listening to yourself, not the surface voice, the one that echoes what others expect from you, but the quieter one underneath. The one you ignored because it was not loud enough to compete with the noise of the world. But in the absence of applause, silence grows roots. You begin to hear your own thoughts more clearly, not as background noise, but as guidance. It is strange at first, uncomfortable even. You are used to checking your reflection in the eyes of others. But when those eyes turn away, you learn to see yourself from the inside. And that is when something shifts. You begin to move differently, not because someone told you to, not because someone believed in you, but because you decided to show up without witnesses, without cheerleaders, without someone holding the door open. Self-reliance does not arrive in a burst of confidence. It arrives slowly, often disguised as loneliness. You wake up one day and realize no one is checking in. No one is asking how you are doing, and instead of falling apart, you start building. You begin taking yourself seriously, not because others do, but because you are tired of waiting. How many times have you paused your growth, hoping someone would give you permission to continue? Hoping they would say it is the right time, the right move, the right direction. But what if that permission never comes? What if no one ever says you are ready? Would you stay frozen forever? Or would you finally claim the authority that was always yours? That is where real power begins. Not in being chosen, but in choosing yourself. The world teaches us to seek validation like it is oxygen, but the Stoics' new peace is not found in popularity. It is found in discipline. Epictetus said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." Freedom does not come from being supported. It comes from knowing that even when you are not, you will continue. That even when the room is empty, you will do the work anyway. And not out of bitterness, but because the work matters. Because you matter. When you understand that showing up stops being a performance, it becomes an act of self-respect. And in that quiet, a new relationship forms, not with the world, but with your own mind. You begin to trust it more. You ask it what it needs. You listen to the fatigue in your body, the pull in your gut, the fire behind your chest. You stop outsourcing your intuition. You stop living reactively. Carl Jung once said, "Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes." That awakening does not feel like a dramatic breakthrough. It feels like subtle, consistent decisions that build a foundation under your feet. You start keeping your promises to yourself. You go for the walk. You write the words. You say no when something drains you. These are not loud acts, but they build something no one can see from the outside. Trust. And trust in yourself is the currency of freedom. There is a quiet kind of strength that develops when you realize you are your own backup plan. When the silence does not scare you anymore. When you do not need to announce your every move or explain your every feeling. When you do not beg for someone to notice that you are trying, because you know. You know the effort you are making. You know the storms you have walked through. You know what it took to still be here, choosing growth instead of collapse. That is not arrogance. That is integrity. You are no longer performing for the world. You are becoming for yourself. There will still be moments of doubt. Moments when you wish someone would say, "I see you." But now you do not depend on it. You no longer fall apart in its absence. You carry yourself with the quiet awareness that you have earned your own respect. And that is rare. That is what makes people pause when you enter a room, not because you demanded attention, but because your energy says, "I do not need it." Seneca once wrote, "The greatest empire is to rule oneself." And ruling yourself does not look like perfection. It looks like consistency in the face of invisibility. It looks like doing what matters, even when no one applauds. It looks like holding your standards high, even when no one is watching. When you build from that place, you are no longer dependent on external structure. You become the structure. You do not collapse when someone pulls away. You do not unravel when someone misunderstands you, because your foundation was never built on their understanding in the first place. It was built on clarity, on quiet decisions made in solitude, on the strength of waking up and moving forward again and again, because that is who you have chosen to become. And this is the most important part. Once you begin to rely on yourself in this way, you stop resenting others for not being who you needed. You release them. You stop waiting for them to return, to notice, to explain. You no longer tie your progress to their presence. You move regardless, not with coldness, but with grace. You become free, not because the pain is gone, but because it no longer defines the path. You carry it, but it does not carry you. That is what true self-reliance looks like. Not an absence of need, but a deep inner steadiness that says, even if no one sees me, even if no one comes, even if no one helps, I will keep going, because this life is mine to live, and I will not wait for anyone to give me permission to become who I was always meant to be. If you are halfway through this talk and you feel the pull to build quietly, hit subscribe on Stoic Ocean and leave one comment about the habit you will protect this week. Small public commitments have a funny way of becoming private discipline. Part 4. Healing is not always content. We live in a world that rewards exposure. Every feeling must be shared. Every wound displayed. Every struggle turned into something others can comment on. The more visibly broken you are, the more attention you receive. But not all attention is healing. Some of it is hollow. Some of it keeps you dependent on being seen as wounded just to feel connected. And slowly, without realizing it, you begin to perform your pain. You start editing your suffering, packaging it for sympathy. You turn real emotions into content, thinking it will bring you closer to other people. But it does not. It makes your healing public property. What was once sacred becomes consumed. What was once your inner world becomes a storyline for others to follow and forget. There is a difference between honesty and emotional performance. One comes from depth, the other comes from habit. One is quiet, the other is rehearsed. And most of us were never taught the difference. We confuse expression with healing. We think that because we talk about it, we have worked through it. But sometimes the more you speak of a wound, the more it stays alive. Not everything needs to be narrated. Some things need to be felt, endured, integrated in silence. The Stoics were not emotionless. They were composed. They believed in feeling deeply, but without letting those feelings control the trajectory of their lives. Marcus Aurelius, in his Meditations, wrote about being like the cliff against which the waves continually break, yet it stands firm and tames the fury of the water around it. He did not mean suppress emotion. He meant do not let emotion become a performance. Let it become presence. We have been conditioned to believe that silence is weakness, that if we do not express every feeling, we are hiding. But some things are not meant to be shared. Some parts of your story are sacred precisely because they belong only to you. Keeping something private does not mean you are ashamed. It means you are protecting something precious. And that unnerves people because silence cannot be dissected. It cannot be pitied or praised on demand. It demands space. It creates mystery. And mystery, especially in a world addicted to access, can feel threatening. Carl Jung spoke often of the shadow, the parts of ourselves we bury or project. But he also said solitude is for him, a fount of healing which makes his life worth living. The truth is, not every form of healing needs to be visible. Some of the deepest transformations happen when no one is watching, when you are sitting with your thoughts, when you are choosing not to respond, not to prove, not to explain. When you let your emotions pass through without needing them to be seen, liked, or validated, that is not suppression, that is sovereignty. It is easy to mistake the loud for the strong, but strength is not always loud. Sometimes it is quiet, still, and completely uninterested in being understood. You do not have to prove your growth. You do not have to narrate your healing in real time. You can keep it to yourself and let the results speak later. And that patience, that refusal to perform, is what gives you power, because it means your peace is not up for public negotiation. There is a kind of beauty in becoming unexplainable, in being someone who no longer shares every emotional bruise just to receive softness in return. You learn that not everyone deserves access to your struggle, not because you are hiding, but because you have stopped offering your pain as a way to earn connection. When you stop broadcasting your wounds, you stop attracting people who are only there to observe the damage. And slowly, you begin attracting people who respect what you have built in silence. Seneca said, "No man is more unhappy than he who never faces adversity, for he is not permitted to prove himself. But once you have faced adversity and grown from it, you do not need to display the scars to justify your strength. You do not need to keep reopening wounds to remind others what you endured. You have proven it to yourself. That is enough." The moment you realize your emotions are not a currency for attention, you stop spending them so carelessly. You start guarding your inner life like something rare, because it is. And in that guarding, you find clarity. You start to realize how much energy was spent explaining what did not need explaining. You feel how much power was lost asking to be understood by people who did not have the depth to understand themselves. You watch how the crowd celebrates vulnerability, but forgets to mention that real vulnerability is not exposure. It is discernment. It is knowing when to speak and when to remain silent. It is choosing who gets to see the real you and who only gets the surface. You do not need the world to validate your emotions for them to matter. You do not need to turn your pain into art just to justify why it hurts. You can hold that pain quietly. You can heal without display. You can grieve without an audience. And when you do, something incredible happens. You stop fearing the silence. You begin to feel at home inside it because it no longer feels like abandonment. It feels like return, a return to yourself, a return to what is real. There is nothing wrong with expressing emotion, but when expression becomes a performance, it robs you of your power. Sovereignty begins the moment you choose presence over performance, the moment you stop explaining yourself just to feel safe, the moment you realize your peace is not fragile. It is forged in solitude. And when others can no longer predict you through your emotional patterns, they start to respect the depth they cannot access, not because you became colder, but because you became wiser. You do not owe anyone a front row seat to your healing. You do not need to bleed in public to prove you are human. Some things are meant to be held close. Some truths are meant to be whispered only to yourself. That is not hiding, that is maturity. And in a world that glorifies noise, that kind of quiet becomes its own form of rebellion, its own form of freedom. Part 5. Rejection as redirection. Rejection feels personal because it touches something primal in us, the need to belong, to be seen, to be accepted as we are. But often what feels like rejection is actually redirection. You were not dismissed because you lacked value. You were pushed aside because your depth could not be digested by shallow eyes. Your silence was mistaken for absence. Your self-containment was mistaken for coldness. You were misunderstood not because you failed to express, but because you carry a frequency most people are not tuned to. That does not make you wrong. It makes you rare. The world, for the most part, does not recognize nuance. It celebrates what is easy to label, easy to consume, easy to predict. So when you do not fit into those neat boxes, you become inconvenient. And in a world rushing to categorize, inconvenience is often discarded before it is explored. It is easy to internalize that as a flaw, to think if you were louder, if you smiled more, if you softened your edges, maybe you would be accepted. But that is the trap, the belief that your value lies in being legible to others. You were not made to shrink into their comprehension. Carl Jung wrote that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are, not who others can easily understand, not who fits the mold, but who you are when no one is watching and you have stopped trying to be approved. That kind of authenticity often costs comfort. It invites misunderstanding. It requires solitude. But it also creates space for a deeper kind of transformation, one that is not driven by applause, but by alignment. There comes a point when you stop interpreting rejection as loss and begin to see it as clarity. Every person who overlooks you, every space that does not welcome you, every silence that follows your presence, it reveals something not about your worth, but about where your energy does not belong. That insight is priceless. It saves you years of self-doubt. It teaches you to invest where you are valued, not just tolerated. And once you learn that, you stop chasing explanations. You stop wondering why someone did not choose you. You realize that not being chosen was the blessing, because it gave you back to yourself. There is a quiet revolution that begins when you stop trying to be understood. You begin to redirect all the energy you used to spend on being seen into actually building something that does not need to be explained, something that stands on its own, a body of work, a lifestyle, a discipline. You shift from emotional scarcity, constantly trying to prove your worth, to psychological sovereignty, where your existence is no longer up for debate. That is where your center of gravity moves inward. You are not moved by approval or rattled by dismissal. You become grounded. And grounded people are magnetic, not because they seek attention, but because they carry something stable in a world that spins too fast. People will still misread you. They will create stories to make sense of your quiet, your ambition, your boundaries. Let them. You are not responsible for correcting every false narrative. Marcus Aurelius said the opinion of 10,000 men is of no value if none of them know anything about the subject. You are the subject. And most people do not know you. Not really. They see glimpses, Fragments, projections, assumptions, simplifications, and while that used to bother you, now you see it for what it is. Noise. The moment you let go of the need to correct the noise, your focus sharpens. You get more done. You sleep deeper. You move cleaner, because your life is no longer built around being perceived correctly. It is built around being lived truthfully. There is immense peace in that. You stop wasting energy explaining your process, your priorities, your silence. You do not justify why you have gone quiet. You do not explain why you walked away. You do not decode your boundaries. You just live them, not as a defense, but as a natural extension of self-respect. You become someone who moves with conviction, not commentary. And over time, that creates distance, not between you and others, but between you and the noise that once clouded your mind. Rejection becomes revelation when you realize it did not shrink you. It sculpted you. It showed you where not to go, who not to become, what not to settle for. Every door that closed clarified the direction. Every silence refined your voice. Every betrayal deepened your discernment. What once felt like exile now feels like space. Space to build, space to breathe, space to finally become not someone acceptable, but someone undeniable. And this shift, this movement from wanting to be seen to choosing to become, it changes everything. You stop speaking to be heard and start speaking to build. You stop walking into rooms to prove your worth and start walking in already knowing it. You stop asking if you are too much, too quiet, too intense, and start asking if the space is too small for your truth. You stop apologizing for your depth and start protecting it. That is not arrogance. That is arrival. So if you have been overlooked, let it be your initiation. If you have been misunderstood, let it be your turning point. You are not here to explain yourself into someone's comfort. You are here to become someone whose presence rewrites the room. And that begins when you finally understand rejection is not the end of your worth. It is the beginning of your clarity. People talk about loneliness as if it is something to escape, as if the absence of others means the absence of worth. But solitude, when chosen with intention, is not isolation. It is transformation. It does not shrink you. It burns away everything that does not belong. At first, it feels like silence, a heavy, echoing silence, where the noise of the world fades and only your own thoughts remain. But slowly that silence sharpens. It becomes a mirror that does not lie. And what you see there, in the absence of distraction, is not your weakness. It is your foundation. Solitude does not destroy you. It reveals what was always there underneath the noise, the craving for approval, the impulse to please, the subtle performances you did not even know you were giving. Those things begin to melt away in the furnace of being alone. And in their place, something harder forms, something real. It is in that stillness that you begin to meet yourself honestly, not the version curated for others, not the identity shaped by expectation, but the raw material of your mind. Your values, your fears. For many people, that is exactly why solitude is terrifying. Because when there is no one left to impress, no one left to chase, you are finally left with the truth. No performance, no edits, just you. And while that might feel like loss at first, it is actually the beginning of freedom. Epictetus wrote that it is not things that disturb us, but our judgment of them. In solitude, those judgments become visible. You start to realize how many of your thoughts are not really yours, how many of your fears came from someone else's voice, how much of your identity was built on avoiding rejection rather than seeking truth. This is where internal alchemy begins. The discomfort does not disappear, but it transforms. What once felt like loneliness starts to feel like privacy. What once felt like exile begins to feel like clarity. You start hearing your own voice louder than the world's opinions. And that voice, uncensored, unpolished, unafraid, teaches you how to live. You begin to understand that peace is not found in a full calendar or a full room. Peace is found in presence, in being able to sit with yourself and not flinch, to feel the weight of your own mind, and not run from it. That is not detachment, that is mastery. Carl Jung said the man who looks outside dreams, the man who looks inside awakens. Solitude is what forces you to look inward, to awaken. And with that awakening comes a kind of responsibility. You can no longer blame the noise for your confusion. You cannot blame others for your stagnation. It is just you now. And that is where the power begins, because the moment you stop externalizing your life, you reclaim the ability to direct it. You are no longer waiting for someone to save you, validate you, or guide you. You start building your compass from the inside out. And that compass points to something sturdier than attention. It points to integrity. Most people avoid solitude because they do not like what they feel when everything else is stripped away. But that discomfort is exactly what makes the process necessary. You do not become strong by avoiding yourself. You become strong by confronting what is unhealed, unclear, and uncertain, and doing so without an audience. That is the difference between solitude and isolation. Isolation is running away. Solitude is running deeper. And in that deeper place, your resilience is formed quietly, consistently, without applause. You begin to make decisions differently, not from, will this be accepted, but from, does this align? You start trusting your instincts more because you have spent time with them. You have listened long enough to separate intuition from insecurity. That is a level of self-knowledge that cannot be taught. It has to be earned through silence, through space, through the kind of mental stillness that teaches you how to carry your own weight. That kind of clarity does not shout. It does not announce itself, but others feel it in the way you speak, in the way you move, in the way you do not chase what used to pull you apart. Solitude makes your boundaries sharper. You stop saying yes just to avoid disappointing someone. You stop engaging in conversations that drain your spirit. You learn that no is not unkind. It is honest. And honesty, when cultivated in solitude, becomes a way of living. You do not need to prove anything anymore. You do not need to justify your distance or explain your focus. You simply live it because you have done the work in silence. And now your energy speaks for itself. Seneca once wrote that we suffer more in imagination than in reality. Solitude helps you see the difference. It pulls you out of imagined disasters, false narratives, and inherited fears. It plants you in what is real. And in that soil, something unshakable grows. A sense of self that does not shift with trends, a direction that does not wobble when misunderstood, a strength that is not loud but lasting. When you return to the world after time alone, you come back different, not distant, but deliberate, not bitter, but bounded. You do not speak to be heard. You speak because your words come from stillness, not from noise. You are not easily swayed, not easily shaken, because you know the ground you stand on. You built it yourself, one quiet moment at a time. So no, solitude is not punishment. It is preparation. It is the training ground for self-trust, self-respect, and self-direction. It is not where life ends. It is where life begins to deepen. Part 6. The old self ends. You remain. There comes a quiet turning point where the version of you that once felt essential begins to fall apart, not with a dramatic crash, but with a slow, undeniable erosion. The old self, the one who needed approval, who bent to fit spaces too small, who rehearsed words just to be liked, that self begins to feel heavy, outdated, false. You try to carry it a little longer out of habit, out of fear, maybe out of guilt, but it drags, it stiffens, and eventually it begins to rot. That is not failure. That is evolution. When something dies within you, it is not always a loss. Sometimes it is the first breath of something deeper, the start of a more honest existence. At first it is disorienting. You do not feel quite like yourself anymore, but you also cannot go back. The mask does not fit. The old patterns feel exhausting. You say less, but what you say carries more weight. You stop explaining, not because you have nothing to say, but because you no longer feel the need to be understood by everyone. The chase for approval fades, and in its place, something steady begins to grow. You move with more intent. You do not fidget in silence. You do not perform your personality to make people more comfortable. You simply stand like a mountain, still, watchful, unmoved. Carl Jung wrote that we cannot change anything unless we accept it, that condemnation does not liberate, it oppresses. You did not kill your old self out of hatred. You outgrew it out of truth. You stopped condemning your need for space, your desire for solitude, your craving for a quieter strength. And in that acceptance, the old self was released, not as punishment, but as a rite of passage. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. That is what the disappearance of your old self can feel like. It feels like loss, but it opens a path where you no longer chase connection, but attract it by being grounded, a path where you do not need to be known by many to feel known within yourself. You do not seek mirrors in others anymore. You found your own reflection, and it is enough. There is something sacred about becoming someone who no longer needs to announce their change. You do not post about it. You do not campaign for recognition. You just live differently, and the difference becomes impossible to ignore. People feel it in your energy, your decisions, your detachment from petty drama. They sense a calmness in you that cannot be faked, because it came at a cost. It was earned in the quiet dismantling of your former self, in the nights you doubted everything and still chose to continue, in the moments where you wanted to explain but chose instead to evolve. Seneca said every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end. This is not just a shift in mindset, it is a rebirth. And like all rebirths, it is quiet at first, underrated, uncelebrated, but incredibly real. And with time, it becomes undeniable, not because you announce it, but because you embody it. You become someone who moves with quiet authority, who does not need to explain their values because they live them, someone whose absence speaks just as loudly as their presence used to, not out of pride, but out of peace. True presence does not come from how much you say, or how loudly you say it. It comes from how little you need to say. There is a quiet power in someone who has stopped seeking validation, a weight in their stillness. You feel it when they walk into a room and do not try to control the space. They simply are. They do not need to announce their presence because their energy carries it. They do not push to be noticed, yet they are the one people watch. It is not arrogance. It is not performance. It is the confidence of someone who is no longer hungry for permission to exist in a world obsessed with appearances. Carl Jung said a person who has not passed through the inferno of their passions has never overcome them. When you have done that internal work, it changes how you move, how you speak, or how often you choose not to, because silence becomes a statement. You stop reacting to every opinion. You stop defending your every move. You let go of the compulsion to clarify yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you, not out of apathy, but out of alignment. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one." That is commanding without words. You do not try to be impressive. You embody what you value. And the irony is, when you stop trying to be impressive, you often become unforgettable. Not because you shouted, but because your silence had depth, because your stillness had direction, because you were not trying to win the room. You were rooted in something deeper than performance. Epictetus said, "First, say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do." Quiet power is built on that principle. You decide who you are, and then you live it, not for applause, but for alignment. There is a strange freedom that arrives the moment you stop needing care. Not because you have become bitter or numb, but because you have outgrown the illusion that your strength should depend on how others treat you. The world no longer has the same power to shake you. Its silence does not unsettle you. Its applause does not seduce you. You move from a center that does not ask for permission, does not beg to be seen, and does not fall apart when ignored. That is the paradox. You only gain real power when you stop needing to be rescued, not from pain, but from the discomfort of being alone in your truth. For a long time, we are taught that care from others equals safety, that we must be heard to feel real, understood to feel valid, held to feel whole. But underneath all of that, there is a deeper truth. Power is not something handed to you by attention, awe, or recognition. It is something built in silence, brick by brick, with the choices you make when no one is watching. Once you stop craving the emotional resources of others, something remarkable happens. You start becoming your own source, and when you do, you realize you were never powerless. You were just waiting for permission to be strong. Carl Jung said the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. And that is where this new power begins, with acceptance, not just of your strengths, but your fears, your darkness, your disappointment, your unmet needs. You accept that maybe they will not ever understand you, that maybe no one will love you exactly the way you always wanted. And rather than fight it, you exhale. You stop resisting what is. You stop trying to control how others feel about you. And in that surrender, a new kind of control emerges, not over people or outcomes, but over yourself. Marcus Aurelius wrote that you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. When your attention is no longer hooked by who notices you, who cares, who claps, or who stays, you redirect that energy inward, not in isolation, but in intention. You start asking different questions, not, why did they treat me that way? But, what can I build with what is left? You start turning your pain into discipline, your silence into strategy, your disappointments into design, because you are not stuck anymore. You are not frozen waiting for the next wave of validation to carry you forward. You have become the current. This kind of power, this grounded, quiet, untouchable strength, is not handed to you by good fortune or the right people. It is forged in the moment you stop needing others to meet you and instead meet yourself where you are. From that meeting place, something more honest rises, a self that is no longer edited to please, a direction that is no longer influenced by fear of being misunderstood, a life that is finally yours, not borrowed from others' expectations, but owned. You become someone who moves with clarity, not desperation, someone who can hold space for their own emotions without leaking them into every interaction, someone who does not crumble when the applause stops because you never built your rhythm around their noise. You do not need to be followed to feel like you are going somewhere. You know where you are going. That is why people start to feel your gravity, not because you demand it, but because you no longer need it. So when you stop needing care, do not mistake that shift for loss. It is a return, a reclaiming, a sharpening. You have taken back the most important thing, the ability to guide yourself, to walk through disappointment without folding, to be unseen without disappearing, to be misunderstood without self-abandonment. That is where everything changes. That is when life starts to move in your favor, not because the world suddenly understands you, but because you have stopped needing it to. And in that space, you become something unshakable, not because you were born that way, but because you chose it, again and again, until your mind finally believed you were already enough. You do not need to be seen to become powerful. You do not need to be understood to become whole. The moment you stop waiting for the world to care is the moment you begin to shape yourself into something it cannot ignore, quietly, fully, unapologetically. Thank you for walking this path with me today. If this message spoke to you, tell me in the comments which line you needed to hear most. Subscribe to Stoic Ocean if you want more of this kind of calm, honest discipline, and keep building. There is another video on your screen right now that will take you even deeper. Watch it next. Keep building. Keep becoming.